Hello and welcome to Business Today. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and with me my colleague Rajesh Sundaram. You're watching our YouTube channel, and on today's episode of Rajniti that we do exclusively for you, our YouTube viewers, we discuss a topic that is of great significance for all of us, which is the issue of what is really happening in our neighborhood. Over the last 24 to 48 hours, you must have seen that weeks and months of turmoil have culminated in Pakistan and Sri Lanka seeing both governments toppling over for different reasons, and that brings the entire issue into sharp focus. The two things that we see witnessing in our neighborhood are of grave concern, especially because last year we saw what happened in Afghanistan. And it's always been said that India lives in a tough neighborhood. And Rajesh, I think the point of how tough our neighborhood comes through with what has happened in Sri Lanka and in Pakistan. I don't think there's any coincidence or correlation. But why has Sri Lanka's government and Pakistan's government imploded in such short time of each other?
I think the trigger would have been the current geopolitical situation, where these were countries, economies that were on the brink, and suddenly with the change, the conflict in Ukraine, the economy was given that blow where it toppled and it fell off. Like in the case of Sri Lanka, this was a crisis that was building over the years. The tourism sector was hit. The COVID had really had a very bad impact on the economy, and this was the final blow. And all the years of misgovernance really came up, and the Rajapakses had no option but to move away. In Pakistan, of course, the differences that the army and Imran Khan had have come to the fore, and now there's a situation where Imran Khan kicking and screaming, but he'll have to go.
So this is quite interesting, and like we do on this show, we try and demystify things, we make them simple for you. And one of the things is that when it comes to Pakistan, it is expected that a civilian government will perhaps not last its full term. And I don't know if Rajesh can recall easily, but I don't recall easily a civilian government lasting its full term, barring one by Nawaz Sharif, really, Rajesh?
Yes. Apart from that, I think most of the civilian governments have been they've been military rule that comes in sooner or later.
So the joke is that a prime minister, if elected in Pakistan, ultimately gets to select a country where he ends up in exile, and that's also happened to military dictators. But on a serious note, how does this impact India? Because like we said at the start of this conversation today, Afghanistan, going back to the dark ages, going back to the Taliban, Afghanistan, which is now denying basic education to girls and women, and we are not talking about other horrors. Pakistan, one of the most radicalized countries where Islamic terrorism has found support for decades together, and we have seen what has happened in Jammu and Kashmir particularly. Sri Lanka, country where we saw a civil war, the LTTE, and the consequences of that, and Sri Lanka had just started coming out of the trouble till the Easter bombings happened. So how would we describe the challenges that India faces on account of this very tough neighborhood? Rajesh, you've reported on external affairs, you've traveled to these countries. What are the top 2-3 challenges that come to your mind?
I think in terms of Sri Lanka, it's going to be very tough, because not only is there an economic crisis there, but also a social unrest that is also brewing. And there is a complex situation there, because there is also the underlying ethnic issues that have simmered under the carpet for a long time. So most of the analysts say that all the, with the full military might, they had crushed the rebellion by the Tamils, also the action that they've taken. But right now, with the kind of sweeping powers that have been given with the emergency provisions to the armed forces, and Gotabaya Rajapakse having an iron grip on the state there, it could just be a matter of time before the social turmoil that is happening right now, which we can see on the streets, is crushed by the military, or there are the sweeping provisions, the draconian laws that have been brought into force could very easily be misused there in Sri Lanka.
And a similar situation of the military having to intervene, although they have said that they have nothing to do with this constitutional crisis where a no confidence motion which was moved, and yet the sitting prime minister dissolved the government, and of course that matter has reached the Pakistan Supreme Court. But are you thinking that there will perhaps also be a further escalation in Pakistan?
Well, the army will always have a say in what happens there, and currently with the situation, I think it's pretty much untenable for Imran Khan to continue, both in terms of the constitutional position there and also perhaps in the way the judiciary at this time would interpret the laws there as well.
Let's now move to a common factor which is visible. As they say, there used to be an American hand which was blamed for all that went wrong in many parts of the world. If you could not find out, or you did not know the reason for a particular incident, it would be easy to blame the CIA and also others. But in this context, and in the context of India's extremely tough neighborhood, there is a China hand. And why do I say that there is a China hand? Sri Lanka has, by all reckoning, close to $3.5 billion or more of outstanding loans, debt that it has to repay China. And the Chinese hand is so evident, it is so heavy, that Sri Lanka had to give out a port, Hambantota, to China because they were not in a position to repay $700 million. The Belt and Road Initiative is perhaps actually a belt around the neck of economies, and Sri Lanka is now discovering it. In Pakistan, one of the closest allies that is propping up Pakistan, and its economy too is pretty much always on the edge really, is China. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, after the Americans pulled out, China will obviously be eyeing in the long term Afghanistan's mineral wealth. Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, we have different levels of relationship with each of those countries. So this tough neighborhood and the Chinese hand really, and the Chinese with what they have done in Doklam, what they have done in Ladakh. Do you think that China is now sitting very pretty with the fact that there is a fresh round of instability, and it will now have a chance and a greater opportunity to interfere in some of these countries that we spoke about?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you see the situation in Sri Lanka, there's no hope in hell with the kind of ratings that it has, or the kind of reserves that it has, or the prospects that the economy has, that it will ever be able to repay the loans that have been taken from China. Also, I think it's just in terms of the diplomacy that India is also handing out billions of dollars to Sri Lanka with the kind of credit rating it has, or the hope, there's no hope in hell, like I said, that they will repay any of them.
But to interrupt you here, Rajesh, if we speak about the opportunity for China, is this also an opportunity for India to undo some of the past mistakes, if there were in Sri Lanka? I'm talking in the recent context, not in the context of the IPKF. We'll not go down that road. Is this an opportunity for India? And India has already extended $1 billion credit line. The foreign minister even offered medicines. He asked the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo to intervene. The situation is desperate, really. We have also extended help with fuel, and I think more will be more help will be extended, because Sri Lanka is also have to learn to have asked New Delhi for more help. So is this an opportunity as far as India goes with regard to Sri Lanka, island nation, but extremely significant from a security point of view also?
Well, absolutely, because what Sri Lanka does is play the India-China card and extracts whatever it can from it. It's like one ex-analyst told me once about a case of the tail wagging two dogs. So that's how they describe it. But if you see over the last few months, there have been a lot of meetings that have taken place between Indian officials and Sri Lankan officials. And all of this is behind the scenes negotiations on what is what they get for the money that they receive. So clearly, it's not there's no return on the money that Sri Lanka is giving it. Probably it'll never be returned. They'll keep extending the loan. But in terms of strategic dividend is what India is looking at. If you see the recent development where certain non-renewable energy small projects were taken in the north of Jaffna, those are of strategic interest to India, because if the Chinese had those projects, although they are economically insignificant, but strategically that would have been a disaster for India.
Extremely close to the mainland, and that's the point that I want to conclude today's episode of Rajniti that we do exclusively for you, our YouTube viewers, which is that while what is happening in Sri Lanka has some element of their own domestic issues, mismanagement, there is also an external factor, which is the Chinese factor. Pakistan, we'll see how it plays out. In fact, the Pakistani Prime Minister, or the ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan, this time chose not to blame India. Otherwise, in Pakistan, the default option for anything that would go wrong was to press the India button and say, "Ye India ne karwaya hai." But in this entire extremely tough neighborhood, difficult situation, India is standing out as a beacon of hope globally, of stability, of fast economic growth. We are seeing how our economy has come out of the 2 years of the COVID-induced recession and slowdown. Even before that, India's economy was underperforming, but now various indicators seem to be suggesting that India's economy is now putting COVID well and truly behind and will embark on a higher growth path. But, and this is very, very significant, this growth is being accompanied by higher inflation, a cost push across goods and services, and that's going to become an issue in the weeks and months ahead. But we'll come to that topic some other time. For now, I'm going to thank my colleague Rajesh Sundaram here on today's episode of Rajniti, where we discussed India's tough neighborhood and how it presents opportunities as well as challenges. Keep tuning in. Do like, share, and subscribe Business Today YouTube. Till our next episode, goodbye.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share, and subscribe.